The day of his wedding had finally arrived, and for Michael, it felt like a dream come true. He had never imagined that he would be standing at the altar, ready to marry the woman of his dreams, after living in darkness for most of his life. Born blind, Michael had known only the world of sound and touch. He had never seen the faces of his family or friends, and most of all, he had never seen the face of the woman he loved, his soon-to-be wife, Rachel. But Rachel was his light in the darkness. She had been by his side for years, guiding him through life with patience and love. Their journey together had been anything but ordinary. When they first met, Michael was hesitant, unsure if someone like Rachel could ever truly love him. He often feared that his blindness would drive her away, that she would eventually tire of the challenges and limitations that came with their relationship. But Rachel had shown him otherwise. Their connection was immediate. Rachel's kindness and warmth were like nothing Michael had ever experienced. She didn't see him as a man without sight. She saw him as a person, as her partner, her equal. She made him feel whole, despite the darkness that enveloped him every day. As the years passed, their love grew stronger, and they faced every obstacle hand in hand. The thought of marrying her had always filled Michael's heart with a sense of peace, even though he could never truly see her face. Their relationship had its ups and downs, just like any other. There were moments of frustration, where Michael felt inadequate, where he couldn't help Rachel in the ways he wanted to. But she never complained. She always reassured him that their love was more than enough. The bond they shared was beyond physical appearances. It was rooted in trust, understanding, and an unshakable connection that went deeper than anything visible. As Michael stood before the altar, dressed in his best tuxedo, he felt a rush of emotions. The cool air of the church contrasted with the warmth of his body as his heart raced in anticipation. The room was quiet, save for the soft murmur of the guests and the faint sounds of the organ playing in the background. His best man, his childhood friend John, stood by his side, offering quiet encouragement. The weight of the moment settled in. This was it. This was the day that would change his life forever. Though he couldn't see it, Michael knew the church was beautifully decorated with flowers, candles, and elegant white drapes. He could sense the energy in the room, the feeling of joy and excitement in the air. But it was Rachel's presence that he could feel most strongly. She was standing just a few feet away, her presence radiating warmth and love, as it always had. The gentle sound of her footsteps as she walked down the aisle had made his heart skip a beat. He could hear the soft rustle of her wedding dress as she approached, and in that moment, he felt his nerves settle. His mind wandered back to the moment when Rachel had proposed to him. They had been sitting in their favorite spot by the lake, watching the sun set over the horizon. Rachel had turned to him, her voice soft, but filled with certainty. "Michael, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" In that moment, Michael had been speechless. He couldn't believe it. He had always hoped, but now it was real. She wanted him, despite all his doubts and insecurities. She wanted to build a future with him. Michael had said yes, of course, but it was more than just a simple response. It was a promise to give her everything he had, to love her with all his heart and soul. As the moment of truth neared, the officiant asked Michael if he took Rachel to be his lawfully wedded wife. His heart swelled with emotion, and he answered without hesitation, his voice steady despite the overwhelming feeling of love that gripped him. "I do," he said, knowing that these two simple words held the weight of everything he had ever dreamed of. As Michael held Rachel's hands, ready to say his vows, he knew that this was the moment where his world would change. He wasn't just marrying a woman. He was stepping into a new chapter of his life, one filled with love, joy, and the promise of a future together. But Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. He had always believed that true love went beyond physical sight. Yet today, he felt an inexplicable sense of anticipation, as if the universe was about to reveal something even more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. As Rachel gazed at him, her eyes filled with love and hope, Michael couldn't help but wonder. Was there more to this moment than he realized? The ceremony had reached its most sacred moment. The air in the church was thick with emotion, the kind that only a wedding day could bring. As Michael stood at the altar, his hands trembling slightly as he held Rachel's, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, an odd sense of calm before a storm. The guests around him were quiet, their faces eager with anticipation, and Michael could hear the soft rustling of Rachel's wedding gown as she stood before him. Her presence filled the space with love and warmth, and though he couldn't see her, he could feel her in every part of his being. But today wasn't just any wedding day. Today, Michael's world was about to change in a way he never expected. The officiant continued with the vows, his voice a comforting hum in Michael's ears. Rachel squeezed his hand gently, and he could feel her smile, though he couldn't see it. They had come so far, through all the years of uncertainty, through the moments of self-doubt and insecurity. They had made it to this day. Michael had always dreamed of seeing the woman he loved, dreamed of looking into her eyes, of seeing the world through her gaze, but he had accepted his blindness long ago. It was part of who he was. He had learned to live in the dark, and Rachel had always been his guiding light. But today, as the ceremony progressed, something was different. It was subtle at first, just a flutter of sensation in the air, a tingling at the back of Michael's neck that he couldn't quite explain. His heart began to beat faster, and he could feel the nervous energy coursing through his veins. He suddenly became aware of the silence in the room. There were no sounds of shuffling or fidgeting. It was as if time itself had paused. The officiant was asking Michael to repeat after him, but Michael's focus shifted. A sudden pressure built in his head, a sensation he hadn't felt before. His heartbeat quickened, and his hands grew clammy. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Then it happened. For the first time in his life, Michael felt a flash of light behind his closed eyelids. It was faint at first, like the first rays of dawn peeking through the night. He couldn't explain it. He wasn't wearing his glasses. He couldn't see anything through his dark lenses. But there it was, a glimpse of light, a small glimmer of hope. He froze, his breath hitched in his throat. The room around him seemed to pulse with energy, and he wasn't sure if he was imagining it. "Michael," Rachel's voice broke through his thoughts, soft and loving. He squeezed her hand, trying to focus on the sensation of her touch. She was his rock, the one person who had always been by his side. But the sensation in his mind grew stronger. The light behind his eyelids grew brighter, more vivid. It was no longer just a glimmer. It was becoming overwhelming, like the sun itself was trying to break through his darkness. Without warning, Michael's eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was a blur, just a mass of colors and shapes. His vision was blurry, but it was there. He could see. His heart raced, and he blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the sudden flood of light. But what he saw next was more than he had ever imagined. As his eyes focused, the world around him came into view, clear and bright. His gaze shifted, and his breath caught in his throat as he saw Rachel, his bride, the woman he had loved for so many years, standing before him, her face glowing with a soft, radiant beauty. Her eyes sparkled with tears, and her smile was like the sun breaking through the clouds. For the first time, Michael could see her fully, and the shock of it nearly brought him to his knees. But what made his heart stop wasn't just the sight of her face. It was the realization that she was different. Her appearance was almost different than he had imagined. He had always thought of Rachel as the woman he loved, of course, but now that he could see her clearly, he noticed the tiniest details, the way her eyes glimmered, the way her hair fell softly over her shoulders, the light dusting of freckles on her cheeks. Everything he had imagined in his mind seemed to come to life in a way he could never have predicted. But it wasn't just Rachel's face that stunned him. There was something else, something deeper. As his eyes scanned the room, his surroundings, he felt something shift inside him. It was as if he could see more than just the physical world around him. He could sense the energy, the emotions of the people around him. The guests who had been watching with quiet anticipation now looked at him with astonishment, as if they too could feel the miracle that had just unfolded. Michael's heart beat wildly in his chest as he tried to process what was happening. His sight had returned, and with it, a wave of overwhelming emotions. There was a feeling of awe, of joy, of gratitude for finally being able to see the woman who had meant everything to him. But there was also confusion. Why had this happened now? Why, of all moments, had his sight returned today, on his wedding day? The officiant, noticing the pause, smiled kindly at Michael. "Are you ready to continue, Michael?" Michael blinked again, his hand shaking as he held Rachel's. He was no longer sure if it was the miracle of sight that had changed him, or if it was the deep love and commitment that had always existed between him and Rachel. The miracle wasn't just in his regained sight. It was in everything he was feeling, everything he had longed for and more. As he looked into Rachel's eyes, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of the moment seemed to hang in the air as Michael's newfound sight overwhelmed him. For the first time in his life, he could see the world around him, the people gathered to witness his marriage, and most importantly, the woman he was about to marry. Rachel, her face, radiant and full of love, was no longer a blur of memories. It was a vivid, undeniable reality. Her eyes, sparkling with joy, met his, and for a brief moment, everything felt perfect. It was as if the universe had aligned for this very instant. But then, as his eyes drifted down to her features, Michael's joy began to fade. A subtle unease crept into his heart, and his thoughts scattered. Something was wrong. The vision he had imagined of Rachel was different in ways that he couldn't explain. It was as though the pieces of a puzzle didn't quite fit together. He had always loved Rachel for her beauty and kindness, but now, in the light of day, under his newly restored sight, there was something in her expression, something in the way she was standing that made his heart race in confusion. Michael blinked, hoping that his new vision was playing tricks on him. But the feeling only intensified. His gaze shifted, scanning her face more closely, and his mind began to whirl. The details, the features he had imagined, were slightly off. Her smile, so sweet and loving, didn't quite match the way her eyes twinkled. Her hair, once so familiar, now looked different, styled in a way he had never seen. He could feel the sudden tightness in his chest, the rush of anxiety building inside him. Rachel noticed the shift in his expression. She must have felt his confusion, for she gently squeezed his hand, her voice trembling slightly. "Michael, what's wrong? You're scaring me." Her words pulled him from his thoughts, but the unsettling feeling remained. He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. He wasn't sure if it was just the shock of suddenly seeing her for the first time, but his mind was racing. He had built so many mental pictures of her over the years, pictures of a life they would share, a future he had always dreamed of. And yet now, with his sight returned, it felt like those dreams were slipping from his grasp. The officiant, sensing the pause, asked softly, "Do you, Michael, take Rachel to be your wife?" Rachel, unaware of the turmoil within him, smiled expectantly. Michael was about to speak, but a sudden realization hit him like a thunderclap. The air around him felt thick, charged, as if the room had frozen in time. He looked down at Rachel's hand in his, at the delicate ring that adorned her finger, and then back at her face, trying to reconcile the picture in his mind with the woman standing before him. There was something strange in her eyes. They were filled with love, yes, but also something else, a flicker of hesitation. It was fleeting, but Michael saw it. His heart began to pound in his chest as the realization grew clearer. Could it be possible? Could Rachel, his Rachel, be hiding something from him? He remembered the conversations they had shared about the future, about their plans to travel together, to start a family. But now, with his sight fully restored, everything seemed to shift. He looked at Rachel again, trying to focus on her expression, but the more he tried to see, the more distant she seemed. The love in her eyes now felt like a distant echo, and Michael wondered, had he been so blinded by love that he failed to see the truth? He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. His thoughts were tangled, and his emotions were all over the place. Why was this happening now, in the middle of the most important day of his life? Was it his vision that had betrayed him, or was it something deeper? Something about the way Rachel was standing, something about the way she was looking at him, felt wrong. Rachel's smile faltered, and she gently reached for his face, as though trying to comfort him. "Michael, please," she said softly. "I need you to say the vows. Don't let this moment slip away." The tension in the air was palpable, heavy with the weight of the uncertainty that had taken root in Michael's heart. He stood frozen, his eyes locked on Rachel, his bride, who stood before him, waiting for him to speak. The church around them felt silent, as if the world had come to a standstill. His mind raced, tangled in questions and doubts, and yet the look in Rachel's eyes kept pulling him back. There was nothing false about it. Her love was genuine, pure, but the confusion that had overwhelmed him wasn't going away. How could he move forward when his heart was torn between the woman he loved and the fear that something had been hidden from him all along? Rachel, sensing the internal battle within Michael, gently squeezed his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, please, don't let the moment slip away. Let's move forward together." There was a softness in her words, a tenderness that reached deep into Michael's soul, calming the storm of doubt that raged within him. For a brief moment, time stood still as Michael let out a slow breath. He had known Rachel for so many years, and despite the doubts that clouded his mind, he knew one undeniable truth. She loved him. It was the kind of love that didn't need to be seen to be felt. The kind of love that didn't care about appearances or flaws. The kind of love that endured through challenges, through every moment of darkness. Rachel's hand was still gently resting in his, her thumb tracing circles on his palm, reassuring him. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, not just through his newly restored sight, but through the clarity of his heart. The love he had always known was still there. Her eyes, her smile, her presence. These were the things that had guided him through life's most difficult moments. And as he stood at the altar, about to marry her, he realized something he hadn't fully understood before. Love was not about seeing the world in perfect clarity. It was about feeling it, about trusting in the connection that went beyond physical sight. Rachel's voice cut through his thoughts again, this time filled with a touch of concern. "Michael, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? I need you." Her words hit him like a jolt of electricity, and in that moment, everything shifted. The doubts began to fade, replaced by the quiet certainty that had always been there, buried under layers of fear and uncertainty. His mind cleared, and he realized that his fears had not been about Rachel, but about his own inability to fully embrace what was right in front of him. His blindness had taught him to rely on others, to trust their love and support, but now that he could see, he had to trust himself, his heart, and his own instincts. Without another moment of hesitation, Michael lifted his head and looked into Rachel's eyes, no longer clouded by doubt. He could see her clearly now, but more than that, he could see the love that shone in her eyes, the unwavering commitment that had always been there. He smiled softly, his heart lightening as he spoke, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions he had just experienced. "Rachel, I've been blind in more ways than one, but today I can see. Not just you, but what we've built together, what we've shared. I can see the love in your eyes, and I realize now that nothing else matters. I'd spent so much time worrying about what I couldn't see, but now I know that what's most important is what I can feel. I feel your love, and that's all I need." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she smiled at him, the weight of the tension lifting between them. She squeezed his hand tightly, her voice filled with emotion. "Michael, I've always loved you. I've always seen the real you, the man you are. the heart that's been with me every step of the way. It's not about sight. It's about the heart, and I've always trusted yours." In that moment, everything fell into place. The confusion that had gripped Michael's heart dissolved, and the room around him seemed to fill with light. His eyes were no longer just a tool for seeing the world. They were a reminder of the deeper connection he shared with Rachel. He had seen her face for the first time, but it wasn't the physical image of her that mattered. It was the depth of their bond, the love they had built, the life they had envisioned together. The officiant, witnessing the emotional exchange between the couple, smiled warmly, understanding the profound moment they had just shared. He gestured to Michael. "Do you, Michael, take Rachel to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and cherish her for as long as you both shall live?" Michael's heart swelled with a sense of clarity and joy. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Not just the moment of his wedding, but the moment when he truly understood the depth of his love for Rachel. He looked into her eyes one last time, and with a smile that reflected the peace he had finally found within himself, he answered, his voice full of certainty, "I do." And with that, the world around them seemed to fade into the background. Michael could see clearly now, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. As Rachel beamed with joy, he knew that they had passed through the uncertainty, and on the other side, there was nothing but love, trust, and the promise of a beautiful life together. The officiant turned to Rachel. "And do you, Rachel, take Michael to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and cherish him for as long as you both shall live?" Rachel, her face glowing with happiness, answered without hesitation, "I do." The church erupted in applause, and Michael and Rachel exchanged a look of pure love. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them, one filled with endless possibilities. Their journey had been full of challenges, but in the end, it was the love they shared that had carried them through. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The miracle wasn't just in Michael's regained sight. It was in the clarity of their love, the trust they had in each other, and the life they would build together from this moment onward.